We're going to resume our ARIN members meeting with our last two presentations. Our treasurer, Bill Sandiford, will give the ARIN financial report, followed by Paul Anderson giving the Board of Trustees report. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. So we put together a few slides here just to give you a little bit of updated information on what's going on with the Finance Committee and the treasurer-related activities. So since the last update that we gave last October, we've continued to adjust our investments with regards to our investment policy statement. And as of the end of February, the balance was $28 million or thereabouts. We continue to monitor and keep an eye on what's happened with the organization as a result of the changes to the fee schedule. There was another change to the fee schedule that came into place in January with regards to transfers. We worked hard. Nate and Val and their entire team gave us a lot of information so that we could get the 2017-18 budget finalized, and that's a lot of work that they go through for that. So that was a big process, and that got completed. And then, of course, we've been dealing with the 2016 financial results and the appropriate forms that have to be prepared and filed. Forward. Oops. All right, 2016 results are summarized here. Registration revenues in the order of magnitude of $18.2 million. Expenses in the order of magnitude of $21.5 million for a operating deficit of $3.2 million. After you take into account the gains as a result of our investments, where we looked at a drawdown on the reserves of about $1.5 million, which was planned. Here is a little bit of an eye buster, but some highlights of some of the areas where there was actuals and budgets and some variances. And on the next slide, I have some explanations of some of the greater ones. So salaries and benefits were a little bit lower than expected. Depreciation was a little bit higher. Professional services, a little bit higher for continuing outreach and travel expense. Sorry, was lower than our budget. Much to the detriment of Steve Ryan, our outside legal firm was not as active as prior years, but this year we're expecting that to increase. We had some higher rent and occupancy last year as a result of the organization moving, but still being committed to lease at the old office on Concord Parkway. So we're still dealing with that and paying that on a monthly basis as opposed to buying out the lease. Our travel for the year was a couple $100,000 higher. And finally, and most importantly, we contributed $1 million to the IETF endowment that was not originally accounted for in the budget. If you take a look at our actual reserves through the end of the year, you can see a breakdown of how things are designated, the various reserves that we have, the three different funds, one for legal defense, one for operating reserves, and the long-term reserve, which is meant for the long-term stability of the organization. Most of it falling into the last category. My former business partner used to say, give Sandiford the money and we'll find a way to have less of it. I took over as the treasurer in 2016 and our reserves are on the decline.
I left it in such a good position.
This was planned. I mean, we've heard from the community in the past that maybe the reserves needed to come down a little bit. So we've put in place a plan where we're going to draw down over the course of the next 2-3 years. We're going to draw down the reserves somewhere in the order of magnitude of $5 million. We'll be running deficits larger than that, but by the time you count the investment gains that we have, we sort of expect to draw down the reserves by about $5 million over a few years. Looking forward into the this coming year that we've already started, this is the 2017 budget versus the actuals from last year. So we're looking to increase salaries and employee benefits is a large one. There's going to be some enhanced depreciation this year as a result of a lot of capital purchases. And those are the two major differences. Some of the other categories are falling pretty much in line with where we would expect them to be. Some additional variances, rent and occupancy, as I mentioned previously, is higher because we're still paying for the old facility. And of course, we gave the $1 million to the IETF, which we're not going to do this year. So internet research and support is $1 million less. And in totality, expenses are going to be up about $2 million for the year, which was part of also the plan to draw down the reserves. And I just gave you all these variances. Any questions? I'd be happy to take them. Left microphone, I think I saw first.
Hi, Bill. David Huberman from Oracle. One of the hot topics of this meeting has been POC validation and the various strategies the AC and the ARIN staff and the community could use to work on making the database more accurate. One of the things that's been discussed in the hallways this week is the proposition of ARIN using some of its engineering and human capital resources to make a concerted effort to look at individual records in the database and potentially go out on its own and find contact information. If that type of effort were to take, 5 or 10 new FTEs or something like that, do you think that would cause a fee increase? If the AC or if the community in general were to task ARIN with doing something like this and it had a more than minimal staff impact, do you think we'd increase fees?
So I'm going to give the answer to that in two parts. With regards to the actual whether or not it will increase fees, I'll defer to John. I would suggest that in terms of the idea itself of throwing FTEs at a problem like this, that if it's something that the community feels is important, there's probably two forums which the board would like to hear from the community. One of them being the open mic session, which we're going to have in about 20-ish minutes, depending on how many more questions you have for me and how long Paul's report is. And the other one would obviously be the suggestion process. And we heard from the community in the past that you wanted additional resources thrown at development efforts, and that came through the suggestion process and numerous Jason Schiller dodges to the microphone during open mic session. And we did that. We took that on. So I think those are the two forums that I would love to hear from. And John, if you could answer the fee schedule question.
So this is simply a question of what the community wants, not a question of resources. If you can describe what you want to have done, not in terms of, throw bodies at it, but what do you actually mean? We'd like to have, for contacts that don't, we'd like to have a phone call, an email. We want someone to visit the building and knock on the... Describe what you want, and then, just as we do with policies, we'll look at the staff level involved. It may actually be something between automation, engineering, and resources we have, something that could actually fit relatively easy. It could be very different. It could be a major something that requires in cases of outsourcing, if you're actually visiting, for example. So it starts with a description of what you want, and then we'll assess the impact, and then we'll figure out if it fits in the plan, and then we'll figure out how to fund it. But the far end of whether it ever results in fees, it might not. If other areas of the organization have resources to spare, we can juggle to make that happen.
Thank you.
Rear microphone.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Bill, could you go back to the internet research funding slide?
It's brought up on a few slides.
Okay, so that's fine. So when John was mentioning this new funding area being provided a couple days ago, he said that all of last year it was turned down, and I now see a $1.1 million, I guess it was, you added that in after that to...
Separate line item.
But it's not mentioned as...
We actually don't budget for it, so go back one, okay. So if you look at
Yeah.
internet research and support, it currently says 110K, and there's actually standing items in there. What I mean by that is, for example, we have a membership in the Internet Society. We support the CTU under that particular line item. So there's a list of standing projects, none of which are what we were talking about for external funding and grants. What happens is, when they put together the budget for 2017, we take a look at a whole bunch of other items, and even though it's not in the budget proposal, they just tell me, add this one in and add this one. We don't put a standing number on it. We look at each grant just before the budget's finalized to see if they want to put it in. So the budget for this line item of external support is 0 every year. That's what I'm going in the board. Some years I propose, if something's particularly worthwhile, I'll say, we had a $5,000 request to fund this activity, and we've put it in here. But it's actually not that internet research and support item, because depending on what we're being asked for, it could show up in other line items. It could show up as a travel support item, or it could show up as a staffing item. Someone asks for support that we end up having to do with staff. So it's not a specific particular line item, and it's not pre-budgeted. It's based on what requests we get in.
Sorry, so my confusion was that I believed you said there was a line item so you would have better tracking.
There's a line item, but it has no standing budgeted amount.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I see no further questions.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.